Well, hello everyone. Here's sure right here of talking about how do we explain expenses right here, and a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we're talking about expensive, right, and a lot of times it's like if we look that up in a dictionary and at 102 is that okay, what does expensive pretty much mean? Well, that means is towards way above the price that maybe that you would expect to pay. Maybe whenever it comes to shopping, or maybe whenever it does come to maybe doing anything, looking around and maybe just kind of getting some ideas, window shopping, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we do talk about expensive, right? And 102, yeah, a little maybe the opposite of cheap, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about expensive, though, that I think is toward it. Yeah, well, really, if you have an idea for what you want to shop for, maybe anything about what's called placing an order for something, and let's just say that if you're going to be doing any shopping around, or if you see something in the catalogs that you like, and for sure that you're going to go ahead and say is toward it, yeah, well, really, that do you think that you'll be able to afford it, and then also that exactly how does it work, and so most of the time it sure seems that way that that most of the time, if you're going to be shopping online, and let's just say if you're going to be shopping at bestbuy.com, and let's just say that if you're going to be shopping around through any inventory there, and 102 is that the first thing that comes to your mind whenever you're thinking about that is toward okay, yeah, well, how does it work? And most shoppers might even say is toward that that's exactly what they're thinking about, besides how much this is and how much that is, right? So a lot of times that each time you're going to be doing any window shopping, no, it sure seems that way that the first thing that really comes to your mind is knowing as toward that okay, yeah, that you see something in the catalog that you like to have, right? And so it's like most of the time, though, with most of the time with shoppers, right? And besides shopping, it could also be home improvements, and then it could also be anything else that you're trying to work out and arrange and all that. But still, that but what are the best ways of how to explain expensive right here? So it's like it sure seems that way that every time every time you think about it, and 102 is toward expensive. What exactly what does expensive pretty much mean? Is this toward it's more than what you would expect to pay? And a lot of times it's like that's usually what it means right there, is that you're more than what you would expect to pay, right? So a lot of times it's like when we do speak about expensive, that think is to where, okay, yeah, well, expensive. That if you have an idea about, okay, yeah, that you're thinking about getting, shopping around for this or shopping around for that, and 102 is toward it, yeah, well, that's expensive. And so, really, there's different ways of how you want to explain expensive, right? And your 102 is that, okay, according to according to somebody else's definition, though, that expensive could also maybe be about like that word for what we're thinking about is toward talk about for expensive, right? And so expensive pretty much means to anybody might say that up to $500, or maybe let's just say up to 5 grand, and I think everybody else would maybe agree and say is to where okay, yeah, up to $5,000. Yeah, $5,000, and for sure that if we were to ask you to do the math, and you think it's toward it, yeah, well, $5,000 is considered to be expensive nowadays, and so it's like yeah. So if you were to start out the category with the number five right here, and if you were to actually convert this into a math problem, no, and 102 is that when we do speak about expensive though, and you probably think it's toward okay, yeah, expensive, but then if I were to put this into a math problem, or maybe any source of equation or something like that, do I want to go and add or divide that? And I would maybe say, if you're trying to put this into a word problem and trying to solve that word problem, for sure that maybe that you would need to add a decimal point along with that, but still that. But what we're trying to configure right here is knowing about is like talk about for expensive right here. So like let's just say that if you're going to be shopping around in 102 is toward that why do you think that everybody else would be asking that question toward it? Do you think that maybe the cost of something is going to be the first question, then compared to how exactly can you explain that? So it's like so every time you do think about that, and your 102 is to where that if you have an idea for what you're trying to work on or what you're trying to what you're doing, and a lot of times it's like do you really have to explain to somebody about why you want to go ahead and do that? And well, really, if you can afford it, right? And but a lot of times it's like anybody might even say too that especially for most couples and maybe relationships, and maybe if you're with a group of friends and a group of people in 102, is that whenever you do say expensive about something, whenever you do use the word expensive, though, that it's like most of the time everybody else is maybe going to say is toward it that expensive pretty much means it's much more than what you expect to pay, right? But a lot of times it's like, why do you even have to explain that? But it's like every time, yeah, it's to me though that's like a nickname, and like everybody else might say is that whenever something's real high top priced though, that maybe more than what you expect to pay would be. I'm like, yeah, like everybody else might even say is that that's if we looked it up in a dictionary though in a 102 is that the type of definition that you would use for that. But still, that how do we explain expensive? And when we say expensive, that means just to word that it was much more. And so most of the time, much more is usually the key definition for expensive. And so every time, with no spaces right there. And I tell you one thing, everybody, that if we were to actually be doing this on an actual calculator, for sure, that U102, that if you did not use space and much more right there, and a 102, that everybody else might say that, well, really, that if we were to be actually working with a Word or Excel document in 102, is to where if you were to write that down, much more with no spaces right there, maybe put like maybe a curly bracket right there or something like that, and 102 is that much more. And so if you were to write that down, and a 102 is that if you're shopping around, that's just something to think about. And a lot of times it's like, much more than what I would expect to pay. And so if you were to use it like in these sorts of response, right? And a lot of times anybody might say is toward that you don't really realize it until you actually had the experience, and maybe if anything, if you've actually looked it up and find out, okay, after you do your shopping, maybe after you actually looked at the receipts and maybe looked at the paperwork in 102, that whenever you were trying to take care of something and find out that something was much more than what you would expect to pay. And so it's like, so how do you explain that? And so it's like, about how old were you whenever you first learned about what expensive really means? And like everybody else might say is toward it, why can't expensive be a short definition for extensions, like giving you more time to be able to make payments or something like that? And I don't know if any kids that may even say is toward it, what's the difference between expensive and extensions? And so it's like that they pretty much they might be a little similar, but tell everybody too that whenever you're talking about trying to explain to somebody about something in 102, that try not to get those mixed up with extensions and an expensive, because extensions pretty much means is toward it giving you more time to be able to to pay the bills, but to give you more time, right? But then compared to expensive, and so it sure seems that way that you 102, that why can't you just say that it's expensive, give me more time, or something like that. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, that, have we really, thought about that, to where that, whenever you talk to somebody about something and they go ahead and say the words, extension. Well, that has been extended. And, like say, well, I don't understand. What do you mean by that? Like, well, what I mean by it was pushed back to where that you'll give you 30 additional days to take care of it, right? And, so most of the time that's usually what it means, and 30 additional days. And 30 additional days. And so yeah, that's usually what it means for like, yeah, a grace period or an extension, right? But a lot of times it's like every time we do think about that, and at 102 is that yeah, that whenever you did the studies about this, and 102 is toward it, yeah, between expensive and extensions, and much more right here. And so it sure seems that way, that every time we do talk about maybe investment, and maybe whenever it comes to savings, and maybe if it's maybe even on a tax return, right, that you're always warned to where that where did the word expensive really come from? But like I usually use it as another word of saying is toward it, yeah, that whenever something is much more. And so like, yeah, even if it is a vacation, or maybe if it is something that you've been waiting to be able to do, or something like that, you're going shopping or something like that. But we might even thinking too is toward it whenever we actually do the math, though, in 102 is toward it. You look at those receipts, from based on your shopping experience, right? But you're always thinking too is that whenever you do get in these conversations, a lot of times that you start talking to somebody about expensive, and they might even tell you that well, I don't know how much you paid for it, but I got a pretty good deal with what I got. And so it's like a lot of times that's usually how we're able to come up with the conversation toward it. You start talking to somebody about something, and then they're going to say is toward it, yeah, well, that was expensive. And I'm like, well, because somebody else might even tell you that, yeah, well, really, that you paid a little bit more than what I paid, because I was able to save a little bit, from whenever I was shopping. Or, yeah, I got mine for free. And, yeah, everybody else might even say that, if you're going to be, working, like, yeah, you'll be a business yourself, like, yeah, for any employers or anybody like that, like, if you get, you'll get something for free, you'll get this for free, or something like, oh yeah, get it for free, or I'll just say free right here. And yeah, everybody else might say that, whenever it comes to free right here, but yeah, include maybe an exclamation point, and also you're free. And any advertisements that we might even see too, that yeah, I mean, no cost, or like anybody say that, yeah, free, but then a lot of those advertisements are going to say something, but still that but what anything that you would add them, like anybody say, is toward, yeah, space. But then also that whenever it comes to yeah, activity. And so it's like, yeah, so everybody else might even say that if you're going to be shopping around, especially, and I want to know too that, if you're going to be registering for an account or something like that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way. That every time we use the word expensive, though, it sure seems that way. That somebody's going to be saying that. What do you mean by that? Expensive? Like, and well. Like you say, it was much more than what I would expect to pay, but like everybody else might even say, is toward it, according to your definition, no, expensive means much more than what you would expect to pay. But then on the other hand, too, that could you also look at that key definition for expensive to where that yeah, I was expecting, and a lot of times everybody else might say that that's usually sometimes what it kind of means too, is that I was expecting, yeah, I was expecting, and so yeah, so a lot of times I really don't know if we've ever thought about that too much of the time. That I was expecting a little bit more reasonable answer than that, rather than expensive. So it's like, so let's just say if you were to get in a conversation with anybody, and let's just say that you go ahead and ask the questions, and the 102 is toward, okay, I was expecting a little bit more than that than what I got, and so it's like, yeah, could you really use that another way of how you want to call for expensive, right? But on the other hand, it's like every time you do think about conversations like that, in a 102 is that, somebody's going to say is toward, okay, what do you mean? And, so yeah, so it's like, you'll usually, yeah, three question marks, something like that. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, you start a conversation, you go ahead and start a conversation, maybe by text or something like that, and it's like, you're always thinking as to word it, yeah, how do you explain expensive? Like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, and so it's like, so every time you do think about a bill, a lot of times, and every time you do maybe think about a conversation, though, that really that whenever you do start any conversation, really, it's like are you really getting you're a lot of times it's like, yeah, you're getting feedback by somebody else about something, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way. That you want to look at that as another way of how do you want to explain expensive. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, boy, it usually means is to where, like everybody else might say, between cheap or maybe easable, pricing or something like that. But it's like, yeah, every time you do think about that, and always 102 is toward it. Yeah, somebody wants a clear explanation about why is it that you keep thinking about that, or why is it that you keep saying this, or yeah, that's paid for, or something like that. And a lot of times you're always thinking as toward it, yeah, you get in these conversations a lot of times, and you're always worried toward it. Why do I have to explain? Well, why do you keep? I'm like, yeah. So it's like, so if you're trying to make a speech about something, if you're trying to talk, if you're trying to make a few points about something, and somebody wants to interrupt you and start asking the questions, like, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but yeah. So if somebody's going to be interrupting you and be asking a question, what do you mean by that? And so that is why it sure seems that way to where that you get in these conversations a lot of times. The main focus is mainly about is to, yeah, you get in these meetings a lot of times, and that's why, like everybody else might say, is toward it. Yeah, that's why that they have training, and that's why that they have meetings. Those meetings, if you don't want anybody interrupting your speech or anything like that, but let's just say that if we're talking about expensive, that somebody they don't want to go ahead and proceed with this application. They don't want to proceed with the paperwork, maybe because of the fact because, oh, okay, well, I don't have time to deal with it right now. So if I don't have time to deal with it, or yeah, it's too expensive, or too much time. I don't want to bother with it. Something like that. But on the other hand, that when we're talking about shopping though, or anything else important that you're working with, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we do speak about how do you want to explain expensive, and you want to know too is toward it really that that's the way that's questioned right there. By the way, is I'm like, yeah, it's not really. Everybody else might say that do you really have to include a picture just for somebody else to really understand what is it that you're talking about? And so it sure seems that way that yeah that. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, like everybody else might say that, you really just have to copy and paste that right there, include that into the question. Yeah, go ahead and paste that right there, and then put a question mark right there or something like that. So it's like, yeah, and I think most writers might even say too that they use double spacing for that reason, so that way all those sentences and discussions won't get all mixed up. But a lot of times it's like every time you do think about that, you'll put that into like a scenario. And what I know is to where, yeah, there's really no reason to put, 4 or 5 spaces right there. But I'm just showing everybody here that, if I can go ahead and maybe use okay. Okay. But anyway, so if you want to put that into like a question right there, and everybody else might say that, okay, yeah, question number one, yeah, something like that. Question number one, and then there will be like a little lines of space if you need some more room to respond to that question, in regards to the application, whichever that you're working on, but in a lot of ways, it's like, yeah, after filling out a lot of those applications, by the way, everybody, whenever I fill out a lot of those applications, it seems like that a lot of the information, even on our tax paperwork, a lot of the information that they're needing to ask you and all that, and a lot of times it's like, you want to know too that, there's really no such thing as a simple question, really, but like everybody else might even say, is to where that the number of times that you have filled out those applications and gone to those interviews a lot of times. It's like, yeah, well, you may not have all that information right there just be able to provide. So it's like a lot of times it's like, whenever somebody's going to be asking a question, though, but whenever you do look at a bill, though, and a lot of times it's like you're always wondering toward it that if you were to ask the question toward it, okay, yeah, how do we explain expensive? Much more. So let's just say if the question, from above was something like, well, how much is your utility or something like that, or maybe something like, yeah, that whenever you do get a bill or something like that, or yeah, so let's just say I'm like, yeah, so like I could. In case of anybody that may want to know too, is toward it, yeah, another reason maybe why people say is toward it that you really should maybe include maybe 3 spaces in between, so that way people can understand what you're talking about. But still, but when we do speak about expensive though, and you're always thinking is toward okay, yeah, that we should know what expensive means. You should know what expensive means right here. It means is towards much more, the price of something is much more expensive than what you would expect to pay. And I can, yeah, products that what I'm talking about, or like, yeah, like shampoo products. I'm sure most of us probably know what I'm talking about. Shampoo related products, or maybe a lotion or something like that. And, cosmetic, lotions or something like that, shampoo related products or something like that, and you're 102. Yeah, anything else that you're going to be shopping around for, but really that when we do talk about expenses and all, I'm like, yeah, talk about for expensive, right? But It sure seems that way. That how do we explain expensive and much more? And but still, I'm trying to keep all this together right here. So I'll go ahead and if anything, I can go and show everybody here the copy and paste, because that's what I'm trying to do right here. Is I'm trying to keep all this right here all in one line right here. Go ahead and just copy and paste that right up here on the top, just to make sure that all that stays together right there. Free activity. Yeah, so it's like so question number one, and I know it can be confusing, but it's like every time you do think about that in 102 is that that the responses like from here, but still. But it's like every time we do think about that in 102, you get in these conversations about what is considered to be expensive and talk about for extensions, right? Much more and more time. And so really that when we talk about expensive and then extensions and also, extras, the daily extras. And what does that mean? Daily extras. Or the weekly extras. The extras. So we may have heard of that before. Maybe I could put it like a comma right there. So it's like, so if you were to actually put that right there in 102, you say, okay, you remember writing that down, but you're trying to remember. So if you were to include all this right here into a question, and maybe not, not everybody's going to understand that. And so that is why it sure seems that way, that that maybe that's another reason why that maybe people would like to have a meeting about that, so that way they can talk about a little bit more about, okay, what exactly, what does this mean, or what does that mean? And that is why it sure seems that way, that if you were to scramble that up into maybe a coupon, for sure not everybody's really going to know what that means right there. And that's why it sure seems that way, that you want to put that into a scenario, right? And maybe that's a little bit of reason why that maybe that's a little bit of why that there needs to be a definition to where what this means and what that means right there, what this means right there. And so if we're talking about maybe doing business, or if it's marketing or anything like that, and you're always warned toward it, much more or much less. And I can put that on here too, that much more or much less right here. So it's like, so not everybody really knows what that means. And if most of us, anybody who shopped online before, I'm sure you would maybe know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Is that much more or much less? And most of the time it's over that if you don't know how something works, for sure you're going to be asking the questions, right? But it's like every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as toward, okay, that's usually the first question, is toward it. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, do you know how expensive it is? Oh, you want to plan a vacation, okay? Well, can you really afford it? And so that's going to be the first question that's really going to come to your mind, ain't it? Whenever it comes to planning something, and maybe if you're shopping around for something, and you're always warned toward it. Why does that have to be put into a scenario? And so it's like, everybody else might say, is to where that a lot of times it's like that whenever it comes to talking about, like, maybe planning, and maybe whenever it comes to keeping your thing organized and everything, but still that but whenever we do explain about expensive, though, that you're always thinking is toward that, why can't you use it, like let's just say that if you're going to be talking about something in 102, is toward it, could you possibly put that into a way of, how do you want to call this, towards awarded. And most insurance companies, by the way, would probably say something like that. Toward it, it's awarded to you. If you have any plans for the weekend, then it's awarded to you. just by, following these simple steps right here. And I'm sure that we've all been there before, but toward, okay, yeah, it's simple. Not everybody, I don't think anybody would agree that they're not really simple steps. But let's just say if it is, if we can maybe use one simple step right there is toward that, you go ahead and that simple step, if anything, is to, make a deposit. And I'm sure most of us would probably know for sure that most of the time it's, please, submit, submit application along with your deposit. Along with the, I'll just say along with the deposit. And so a lot of times, so if we were to actually use it, so if you were to, so if you were to respond to a conversation like that right there, and most of the time that would probably be something that you would see right there. So let's just say if it is, maybe the airlines or somewhere like that, and at 102 is that, you see that on the advertisements even. Submit your application and submit application today. I'm so for today. And so you would see something like that. Yeah, I'm sure most of us have been there to where you would see something more like that right there, right? You submit application today along with your deposit. And so you would see something more like that. And so it's submit your application today along with a deposit. And so that's usually something that you would usually see right there. But still, it's you're right that. So it's every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as toward, do you really have to explain everything? But on the other hand, too, it's really, you're just really explaining to that somebody else how that works right there, right? And it's it seems like almost all the time that, maybe not everybody knows how it all works. And so that's why you're just really, or just, you get into conversations with maybe 5 or maybe 15 or maybe 20 other people, and you're always thinking as toward, well, really, whenever you do start a conversation about something, and it's why do you want to do that? Or do you know how expensive it is? Or, why do you want to do this? Or why do you want to do that? And so almost all the time, it sure seems that way that, whenever it comes to working out something, and maybe whenever it comes to taking care of an important task, right? And you're always wondering to where that, how do we explain expensive? And that is why it sure seems that way that, that if there's any source of a key definition for that, such as to word it much more. And so it's so almost all the time, if we've thought about that to where, just use much more right there. And say, well, what do you mean? You know what much more means, don't you? Well, of course I don't. Well, then that's what I mean. So every time you get in these conversations, by the way, it's everybody else might say that, if it's with your neighbors or anybody, and you're always wondering, too, that, that whenever they say, what do you mean? I don't understand. What do you mean by that? Well, so it's so you don't, until they see the information for sure, until they're able to look over your information for sure, they're not going to have no clue what you're talking about. And that is why it sure seems that way that, everybody else might say is toward that, would it be a good idea to have a packet of paperwork handy so that way you can show them, a picture of what you're talking about? Visualize, not everybody can visualize what you're talking about. So that's why it's can you explain what is it that you're talking about? And then maybe that's another reason, maybe why that people say is maybe that's another reason why that a lot of these advertise, when the companies advertise something for sure, Yeah, that they advertise, advertisements are made for that reason, right? But at the same time, it's like, not everybody understands all that, and that's why it's like 102 is toward it. Yeah, do you think that maybe much more would be a key definition, to be used for that purpose? But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.